This is the Great North Wrestling Podcast, the official podcast of the Hannibal TV, Canada's #1 pro wrestling YouTube channel, with your host, three-time Canadian champion and GNW lead reporter, Devin Hannibal Nicholson.
This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, and today on the Great North Wrestling Podcast, we have former AWA, WCW, and WWE star, the Patriot Del Wilkes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. And to start this off, I was just wondering, it seemed like you started your career off pretty quickly, jumping right into the AWA. How did you get on that national platform so fast?
Well, actually, it wasn't as quick as you might think. I spent a couple of years working here in South Carolina, my home state. I was trained at a school owned by the fabulous Moolah. And for the better part of a year, maybe even longer, just worked on the shows that she promoted around South Carolina. One night on the show, she had Wahoo McDaniel. And first time I'd met Wahoo, and Wahoo took a liking to me. We sort of hit it off, and then Wahoo, for the next year or so, made sure that wherever Wahoo got booked, I got booked. And then it was after that, Wahoo had gone to work for Vern in the AWA. He told Vern about me. I told Greg about me, Greg Ganya, and they brought me up for a TV taping, and I stayed there for a while, and that's where the Trooper character came into existence. So it took me a couple of years to get up to the AWA and get exposed to a national TV audience on ESPN.
And you held the AWA Tag Team Championships while you were there. Was that the first big title that you had won up to that point?
It was. Matter of fact, DJ Peterson and I were the last tag team champions in the history of the AWA. It was a company that was once one of the greatest territories in the business, but at the time, or by the time I got there, it was a company that was struggling to stay afloat, basically sort of on life support, but it presented me to a nationwide TV audience through ESPN, so it was very valuable. But yes, that was my first belt of any significance when DJ and I won the tag team belts there.
What was your overall experience like with dealing with Vern Ganya at that time? Because I guess he may not have been in the best of spirits in the dying days.
Well, I had heard some bad stories, or horror stories, I guess you would say, from guys that had worked for Vern. But I've always judged people on the way they've treated me, and Vern treated me with nothing but class and respect. He saw potential in me. He gave me an opportunity. He was the first one to put me on TV. So my time with Vern was good, and I appreciate every minute of it. Now, obviously, you could tell that the struggles of trying to keep the AWA meaningful and in existence was wearing on Vern. There was always rumor of the next big financial deal down the road that was going to infuse a bunch of cash into the company and revive the company. And at one time there was a rumor that Viacom was going to dump millions of dollars into the AWA, but none of that ever happened. And unfortunately, what was once a great company finally just had to close its doors. But my experience with Vern was nothing but positive.
And after that, I guess you went to Global, and that's where you actually became the Patriot. Was that a gimmick that you came up with?
No, it wasn't. When I was contacted by Bill Eadie and Joe Pedicino, again, the Global Wrestling Federation was something that was a rumor for the longest period of time. It was a company that was talked about, and there was a big businessman from Africa that had millions of dollars that was going to dump into this new company, and we were going to be on ESPN. As a matter of fact, we were going to end up with the same time spot that the AWA had. But it took things longer to develop than I think everybody initially thought it would. But when I was sent a ticket to fly out to Dallas to do the TV taping for the very first TV show for the GWF, I went with my Trooper gear, fully expecting to work as a Trooper. I had not been told otherwise. And checked into the hotel there. Everybody was staying at the same hotel. So literally probably just a few hours before we left to go to the building for the first TV taping, I got a call from Joe Pedicino, and he asked me to walk over to his room, and I did. And in the room there was his wife, Bonnie Blackstone, and Bill Eadie, and they laid out the idea of the trooper character, the Patriot character, to me. We were involved, our military was, in the liberation of Kuwait in 1991. The Iraqi army had gone into Kuwait and occupied Kuwait. George Herbert Walker Bush sent our military in to liberate Kuwait. And patriotism was at, a fever pitch. It was just, you could feel it. You could sense it everywhere you went. People were behind the military. Patriotism was at an all-time high. So they approached me about the idea of a patriotic character. And Bonnie, as a matter of fact, had just a brown paper grocery bag that she had brought with her. She unfolded it, and she pulled out the red, white, and blue mask, the red, white, and blue tights, the red, white, and blue trunks, a red, white, and blue vest. And they said, look, man, this is our idea. We think you're the guy that can pull this off. And it changed my career.
And I guess from there you went to WCW, which is one of the places you're mainly remembered for, and you were teaming as the Patriot with Marcus Bagwell.
Well, I had a stop before WCW. I had the opportunity to go to All Japan Pro Wrestling and do a tour for Baba. Now, I had gone in 1989, I think it was, and I'd done one tour for All Japan as the trooper. And it really didn't go well. I just wasn't prepared for that style of work. I still was a young guy. I was still somewhat of a greenhorn learning the business. And that tour didn't go well. So I got back home and I thought I would never hear from Baba again. But after they saw me again in the GWF with more experience, a different character, they contacted me and offered me a full-time job. They actually offered me one tour, and about 2 weeks into that, 2 nights into that tour, Baba pulled me aside and offered me a full-time job with All Japan. So I spent about a year and a half working for them, and then got the call. I knew Eric Bischoff from my days in the AWA. He was our TV guy, our TV color guy. And so we'd known each other for several years. He was now running WCW. He contacted me. I live about 3 hours from Atlanta. I drove over and met with Eric and walked out with a 3-year deal and started my career in WCW. Now, I went in as a singles performer, as a singles wrestler. I'd been there a couple of months, and they approached me, and when I say they, it was Greg Ganya, who was on the booking committee, Kevin Sullivan, Flair, several guys that were on the booking committee there, Dusty, Bischoff. They approached me about the idea of a tag team with Bagwell called Stars and Stripes. I'd known Bagwell from the GWF days when he was working as a handsome stranger, a guy that had great potential, great talent, and hard worker. So I was all for it. So they put us together, and we had a good run there. We were tag team champs twice, and had a lot of good tag teams in the company at the time. And Bagwell and I were able to have good success there.
Have you stayed in contact with him at all over the years?
I have. As a matter of fact, I have stayed in contact with Bagwell probably better than anybody I worked with in the business or anybody I knew in the business. I still stay in contact with so many guys, but I talk to Bagwell more often. And he's a dear friend. I love him like a brother, and I know he's had some tough times in the business, and it seems like in some situations he's gotten a bad reputation. I never really understood that. I've known Marcus to be several things. 1, a hard worker. 2, a dedicated guy. 3, a guy that loved the business. 4, a guy that was serious about the business, that worked hard, trained hard, always wanted to present himself looking good, in shape, and do the best he could. I guess along the way he's ticked a few people off, but I hold Marcus in the highest of regard.
And it's written on the internet that you no-showed Slamboree 95. Is that true, or is that a rumor?
No, it's absolutely true. After about a year and a half or so, maybe 2 years in WCW, they had brought Hogan in, they brought Savage in, and a lot of guys from the WWF roster at the time. They had gone in and really, rated that roster and brought in some big-time names. And the company now had turned its focus to everything Hogan and everything Hogan and Hogan's buddies. whoever Hogan wanted pushed, whoever Hogan wanted in a program. Hogan pretty much dictated everything that went on in the company at that time. And a lot of us were sort of put on the back burner, and really, I felt like we were going nowhere, Marcus and I. And I reached out to All Japan, and they said, look, man, we'd love to have you back. And so I worked out a deal with them, and I made Marcus aware of what I was doing. As a matter of fact, let me go back. I went to Bischoff before I did this and before I no-showed him. I went to Eric and said, look, man, I'm unhappy here. You'd have to admit you're not doing anything with us. You're not doing anything with me. I'm just sort of floundering around here. Give me an opportunity. Let me out the last year of my deal. I'll go back to Japan. I'll be on the other side of the world. The only people that will see what I do will be the people in Japan. There's no Japanese TV that comes into the States, so you're not going to have to worry about competing with me, and you wouldn't have to worry about that anyway. I'm not that big a deal to you at this point. So just let me walk, let me out of here, let me go where I feel like I can flourish and do something with myself. And he refused to let me out of my contract. So I got home, and I told my wife what my intentions were, and I called Marcus. I owed that to him. And I called him, and I said, I just want to let you know, I will not be at the pay-per-view. Now, you can play dumb. You can do whatever you want to do, because I know they're going to come to you. They're going to question you, and you handle that any way you want to. That's your business. But I owe it to you to let you know I'm done. I'm out of here, and I won't be at the pay-per-view. I love you. Best of luck to you, buddy. And so that's what I did.
And I guess when you did that next tour with, or the next run with All Japan, you were teaming with Johnny Ace a lot. What was he like in those days? Because now he's gone on to be a big wig in WWE.
Always got along good with Johnny. We did well as a team together. He and I teamed a lot together. I also teamed a lot with Kabashi, and then they put the three of us together as a team. Global, Energetic, Tenacity, or it was GET, and I forget what each letter stood for. But they paired up or put together that trio. But Johnny was always a very Johnny had a good mind for the business. Johnny was good at putting finishes together and putting matches together, and in that sense was very talented, and we got along well. I've always thought a lot of Johnny. I haven't talked to Johnny in a long time, but I tell you, I was part of what I consider, a lot of people go, man, working in the WWE or the WWF at the time's got to be the highlight of your career, but it wasn't. The highlight of my career was the two times I worked for Baba. I worked for Baba probably a total of maybe 5 years, when you combine both times that I worked for him. That was a highlight of my career. That was the best company on the planet. It had the greatest roster of talent that I'd ever been around. And the matches that we saw and we put out night after night after night were the highest quality matches out there. When you look at the stuff from the 90s that All Japan produced, there's nothing that can touch it. And while I was grateful, because the next step after my second run with Baba was the WWF, and I don't mean to jump ahead of you, but everybody goes, man, that had to be the highlight of your career. Well, it was a great part of my career, but it wasn't the highlight.
I guess you're mostly remembered by your WWE time was, of course, when the Hart Foundation was hot, and you were one of the main American characters that were going up against the Hart Foundation.
Yeah, I walked in there. When I met with Vince, I'd been contacted by JR. I knew Jim, and I'd been contacted by Bruce Pritchard about coming up and sitting down with Vince and meeting with Vince. They had actually reached out to me in the early '90s about going up there, and things just did not work out at that time. I was committed to Baba and working for All Japan, and I didn't want to mess that up. That meant that much to me. So I sort of said, look, guys, now's not a good time for me. So I had the opportunity again in the late 90s. And so I flew up and met with Vince, and we had a good meeting. And I walked out of there with a 3-year offer on the table, and I told Vince I wanted a couple of days to think about it. And I guess what I was a little hesitant about at first is Vince wasn't convinced, and no pun intended, that a mass character could get over at that time. He just felt like the wrestling audience had smartened up a good bit, and the mass character just wouldn't get over. And my argument was, gotten over everywhere I worked, Vince. Global, WCW, All Japan, the character's always gotten over, been a popular character with the people. I think it'll work. And after a couple of weeks of seeing how the crowd reacted to me, Vince then got the idea of putting Bret and I together. Bret had turned heel and was on this anti-American campaign and just putting the boots to everything American. So it was perfect timing for me to walk in and into that angle with Bret. And I thought we did some good things together.
How did you find working with him? Because you have some people that say that he was developing some attitude issues at the time, and other people that say he was always great to work with.
He was, and I spent a lot of time around Bret during my time in the WWF, and we talked a lot, whether it was in locker rooms, because we worked against each other so much, and we spent time talking on the phone too a good bit. And it was obvious. He made no bones about it to me. He was unhappy with the company. He didn't like the direction of the company. He thought it was getting too adult-oriented. They were pushing the envelope too much. He didn't like that aspect of it. He was unhappy with what they were doing with his brother. Obviously, he and Sean were having issues. So there was a lot going on with Bret and in Bret's mind at that time. But I can honestly tell you, and I'll tell anyone else, and I always have, it never affected what Bret did in the ring. He was a pro's pro. I enjoyed working with him. He was a great guy to work with. And whatever was going on outside the ring with Bret never affected one time anything that we did in the ring together. He was a pleasure to work with.
And your run there was pretty short overall. What was the reason for that it was just a short time in the WWE?
Well, I had started having some pretty serious injuries in All Japan. All Japan was sort of a blessing and a curse to me, even though I consider it the highlight of my career. It was the most fun I ever had in my career. But Baba did business different. Every match was a clean finish. There were no run-ins, no double DQs, no count-outs. Every match had a clean finish. Therefore, it lent itself to be a more physical style of work. We put butts in seats based on what they saw inside those ropes and in that ring. So the matches were believable. They were a lot stiffer, and it took a toll on my body, and I started having problems staying healthy. I'd blown a knee out. I'd blown my tricep out twice. So by the time I got to Vince, I was damaged goods, and I knew when I signed that 3-year deal with Vince, I knew in my heart of hearts, that physically I probably would never be able to fulfill the 3 years. I knew I was on borrowed time. I needed several surgeries, and eventually the injuries caught up with me. I got a call one day from my orthopedic surgeon, and he just said, Dale, he said, I think you need just to have a heart-to-heart conversation with yourself and realize, son, your body is shot. You've done a lot to it. I played football for 13 years prior to getting into wrestling, and I'd put my body through a lot. So we had a call with Vince and JR, a conference call, and just told them that I just was not physically able to fulfill the 3-year obligation that I committed to. And Vince left the door open for me, and I left there on good terms. He said, Dale, you need to get yourself healed. Get the surgeries that are necessary. Get your body healed up. Take as much time as you need, and you're welcome to come back. And I'll work you on a part-time schedule if you want. I'll work you on whatever schedule best suits you and your physical abilities or maybe capability or inabilities. He said, I'll do whatever I can to help you out. And but after the surgeries, I had some other issues that then presented themselves in my life, and I just never went back.
And in recent years, the Honky Tonk Man and Tom Brandi, I guess, have not the Honky Tonk Man himself coming out as the Patriot, but I understand he's had his son dress up as a Patriot at various conventions, and I guess Tom Brandi actually works as the Patriot. What are your thoughts on that, and how is that able to happen?
Well, my thoughts on it is I think it says a lot about a guy who had a mediocre career at best. When I'm talking about Brandi, I think I'm probably doing him a big favor to say he had a mediocre career. He didn't. I think the best part of his career has been pretending to be me, and I think that's a sad commentary on a guy who's not capable of creating a character himself or developing a character that would get over with the people, but he's got to slide off the coattails of somebody else that was able to take a character that was presented to him and develop that character into one that the wrestling fans really liked and was over with the wrestling fans. He claimed that he bought, I sold him the gimmick. Nothing could be further from the truth. I've not talked to Tom Brady or corresponded with Tom Brady in 20 years. So that's a lie. HTM claimed that he had the trademark to it or whatever you want to call it. He actually, I think, was able to get a trademark years ago where he could advertise it overseas. He claimed he was doing some overseas tours and tried to contact me and could not get a hold of me. He claimed he had no way of getting a hold of me, that he tried to get in contact with me and he couldn't. So he took some guys and worked some overseas tours with them and used Tom or someone as the Patriot, and I guess was able to obtain some type of right where he could advertise it overseas on posters. But that was the limit of it. That was it. Again, I just think it says a lot about Tom Brandi. And I know I've got more pride about myself than wanting to pretend to be somebody else. I think that just says a lot about somebody and their inability to create and get their own self over.
Have you run across the Honky Tonk Man at any autograph convention or anything since he's started?
I have. As a matter of fact, a few years back, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was either at WrestleCade or the NWA Legends Fan Fest in Charlotte. One of the two, I can't remember which one. My wife and I got on the elevator with him, and it was cordial. How you doing? How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. And that was about it. So that's been my only contact with him. People have contacted him, and I can't believe he bought the rights. He owns that. It's amazing if he owns that. I still get royalty checks every quarter from the WWE. I have a website that sells a good bit of merchandise off of it. DVDs, T-shirts, masks, pictures, posters, cards, whatever you can think of. Anything I can put my likeness on, I do. And
what is that website for people listening here if they want to get some Patriot merch?
Sure, www.delthepatriotwilkes.com and delthepatriotwilkes.com. And like I said, we've got pictures and cards and masks and shirts and DVDs. We come out with our documentary a couple of years ago. So you can get all that on the website, and, of course, everything will be autographed and mailed out to you. And also, too, you can follow me on Facebook at Del Wilkes, and then at Twitter at Del Wilkes, all caps.
And I guess your documentary probably details some of the struggles, I guess, you've had with, some prescription and recreational drugs over the years. How did you finally get over those issues?
Well, it took me to the absolute bottom. My main problem was, as with so many in the industry, unfortunately, was the prescription pain pills. You take a couple one night because you're hurt and you want to get through a match. You want to do what you're paid a lot of money to do, which is go out and perform for the wrestling fans. And you're hurt, you can barely walk, you can barely lift your arm above your head, so you take a couple of Percocets one night, and the pain goes away, and you can work and do what you need to do. Well, for me, those two that I took one night before a match eventually led to over 120 a day. And it was a horrible addiction that took me to the absolute depths of hell almost. And I'll tell you exactly what got me straight is I had such a problem and such an addiction that the doctors around Columbia cut me off. They realized I had a problem, the doctors that I was using and going to see. So I literally became a doctor, and the doctor wrote me a prescription one day, and off that, I got his DEA number, his information, and I started calling these prescriptions in myself. That's a felony. They put you in jail for that garbage. So I actually ended up doing almost a year in prison back in 2000 to 2001. And prison saved my life. It gave me an opportunity to get cleaned up, to get off the pills, to get my mind straight and realize, what damage I had done through this addiction. And actually, it was '03. I walked out of prison in '03, so it was '02 to '03. And I walked out Valentine's Day of 2003, and have been drug free since. So very thankful to get a second chance in life and to be able to regain my life and have a regular, normal life now without having to realize or rely on anything to get me through the day.
What was the hardest part about the time you had to do in prison? Because as good as it was, I'm sure maybe there was some possibly confrontations with other inmates or things of that nature.
Well, and you're right. As much as it helped me, it was horrible. Being locked up and being told when you can eat and when you can shower is horrible. Standing before a judge and being sentenced to prison and then being shackled in front of the judge and everybody else in that courtroom and led out with your hands and your feet shackled is an embarrassing thing. It's a humiliating thing. And the worst part was being away from my family. And also, too, it was tough. Finally, getting sober and getting clear-headed and being able to realize what damage I had done. I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. But I used the time for good. And I used the time to help me get my life together and get back on track. Now, the confrontational part, I never experienced that. I was able to because of my background. I was in a prison here in South Carolina, so a bunch of the inmates knew me from my days as an All-American football player at South Carolina, and even more of them knew me from my days as the Patriot and the Trooper. So I walked in with instant street cred, and so I never had anybody challenge me. I treated everybody in prison the way I wanted to be treated, with respect. And I found when you treat a man with respect, he'll also in turn treat you with respect. And so I was able to do that year without any kind of confrontation or any issues or any problems.
And are you working regular jobs now as well? Or I know you're still doing autograph appearances here and there, but what are you doing with your time mostly now?
Well, for the last 13 years, I've been in the automobile industry. I've worked at a Nissan dealership in my hometown in sales, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful career. It's been great to me. It's been very rewarding in so many ways, financially, the ability to create relationships with people on a daily basis. The people that come in and are looking to purchase an automobile, so it's allowed me to create those kind of relationships. I've also been able to go to churches, youth groups, business meetings, and share my testimony. And I have stayed active doing autograph signings and things like that. So got a full life. Things are good. I'm a grandfather of two granddaughters now. So life's as good as it's ever been for me, man. I'm very thankful.
Well, we appreciate that you talked to us. I hope that one of these days, if we're ever at the same autograph convention, I'll do a full video interview, because you've had such an extensive career. We just really grazed over it today. But to close this off, do you want to remind people of your websites and social media and any final message to say to the fans listening to this?
Yeah, first of all, again, at the website, thepatriotwilkes.com, you can get all the merchandising there. And also on Facebook at Del Wilkes, and there's also Del the Patriot Wilkes. So there's 2 Facebook pages. And then on Twitter, it's all caps, Del Wilkes, at Del Wilkes. And to the wrestling fans, I would say what I've always said. I'm very thankful. I'm very appreciative. Without wrestling fans, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done as performers and wrestlers. And I love the opportunity to go to these autograph signings and to meet the fans and spend time with them. They're the greatest fans on the face of the earth. They remember things about your career and about our careers that sometimes we don't remember. And it's refreshing and it's fun just to be able to communicate with them and to just relive some great days and great times. So I'm very thankful and very appreciative of all the wrestling fans and just certainly love them.
And finally, I forgot to ask you this earlier, but I know the fans are going to want to hear this. Do you have any favorite match of your career?
Well, there are several. Well, I don't know if I could say a favorite one, but I've got several favorites. Obviously, the first night I worked with Bret in the WWF in Pittsburgh on Monday Night Raw. The entire time I worked with Bret, and then some of my favorite matches are always going to be in Japan. Matches, I'll tell you, some of the most memorable matches to me are matches, single matches with Kobashi. Tag team matches with me and Johnny Ace against Kobashi and Masawa, or Kobashi and Kawada, or me and Kobashi against Ace and Steve Williams. There's just too many to really single out one, but those are the most memorable ones of my career.
Well, you've had a great career, and I'm happy to hear that you've gotten over all of your issues and you're doing well in a new career outside of wrestling, because as you know, a lot of wrestlers can never get over their wrestling career once it ends. So I wish you
You're exactly
success.
right. You're exactly right, and I appreciate that.
Well, thanks a lot for talking to us, and we hope to catch you down the road in person.
Sounds good. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and subscribe to the Hannibal TV on YouTube for all the latest GNW news and videos. Follow at Devin Hannibal on Twitter and check out our website at thehannibaltv.com.